Trezaki Show. I'm the Trev. It's too sweet. Anyway, forgive me if I sound like I'm talking with a lisp. It's only temporary. That's all I'm going to say. But anyway, we're heading in to the Four Nations face-off break here. It's coming up very quickly. I mean, last games for the regular season for a week and a half are going to be played on Sunday. And as you can tell, I'm pre-recording this. Today is the 7th. I figured at least talk about, some of my early impressions of the 24-25 season at the break before we get into the trade deadline and the playoff push. Those are the next big things, obviously. But I just want to give my thoughts as to where we're at and what I've kind of experienced this season just by watching. But let's talk about it. Now, the first thing I want to hit on is the predictability, or the lack thereof. If you go all the way back to my season prediction videos, just follow the pictures, you'll find them. I was pretty confident in most, not all, but most of my division predictions for how the season was going to go. And to be honest, a lot of teams have really let me down. Obviously, the first one being your Seattle Kraken. Yeah, it's not pretty. I was wrong on the Kings at this point. Now, I wasn't wrong about the Sharks. That should not be a surprise. Whereas in the Central, I thought Dallas was going to be first overall this year. Instead, you got the team that I picked to be fourth in the division being first overall at this point. Granted, there's a lot of season left over, but we are in the final 20-some game push for a few teams anyway. Nashville, who I thought was going to finish second in the division, sure don't look that way right now. Not even close. I'll go over my thoughts on the playoff push before this video's end, but Nashville is not looking like the team that spent how many millions of dollars in the offseason recruiting Steven Stamkos, Brady Shea, or Jonathan Marchessault. Something's not working in Nashville. Chicago shouldn't surprise anyone. No. Not much you can say there. Rebuilds take a long time. Whereas you move one over to the East in the Atlantic Division, obviously the defending Stanley Cup champs are going to still play like the defending Stanley Cup champs. And the team you obviously picked to be number 2 is obviously going to be the team picked number 2, but Ottawa's fighting for a playoff spot, and I picked them to finish last in the division. What was I thinking, right? The Yzer plan, it's taken some time to get some life under it. It took them finally firing Lou on and bringing in Todd McClellan, which is never a bad move initially. But the Atlantic looks like the Atlantic should, I guess, with the exception of Ottawa. And then there's the Metro, and whatever's happening in New York, it's not doing any good to the team. I picked them to be first in the division. I didn't pick the Capitals to be in a dogfight with the Winnipeg Jets for the President's Trophy. But them's the breaks when it comes to predicting, right? The Blue Jackets, who I thought were going to finish 32nd overall in the league, are again, much like the Ottawa Senators, fighting for a playoff spot. I thought this was going to be their worst year ever, with everything that went on during the offseason and trying to find a way to come to grips with that. They've proven me wrong. And they're playing like there's no tomorrow. So it's good to see that, adversity isn't necessarily sticking the team down. That's always a great thing. And then obviously there was that trading period that lasted for about a week, maybe a little bit longer in January, where you saw Mikko Rantanen and Taylor Hall both go to Carolina. You saw Kaapo Kakko benefiting from the move to your Seattle Kraken. And you finally saw Vancouver pull the trigger on a few trades, the biggest one obviously being JT Miller to the Rangers, which leads to my next point, the drama in Vancouver. Does this not remind you of the drama in Ottawa when they were trying to contend, but even the players didn't want to play in Ottawa? Reminds me of that. It's hard to say if that's really the end of the drama in Vancouver. I don't think it is. I think there's still more coming. But yeah, again, it's like one of those things with the Rangers. It's whatever's going on in Vancouver is not helpful to the team. But thankfully for the Canucks, Demko is getting back to playing like he's on fire. So that's never a bad thing either, right? Right. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the great chase. As of this moment, every time Ovechkin scores, I'm yelling out the next number. And when he scored yesterday, the first word that came out of my mouth was 16. So at this point, we're at 16 away from an unattainable Gretzky record being broken. And I use quotations on that one because for the longest time it was deemed unattainable. There was no way anybody was going to score close to a Gretzky number in goals. And we're 16 goals away. And if you believe the forecast, it's going to happen in April at home against Carolina. That's the forecast. I mean, forecasts have been wrong before. I mean, look at it every time EA Sports picks Vancouver to win the Cup. It doesn't happen. But all I'm saying is it's a fun record to watch. And I'm looking forward to stopping the annual Ovechkin to 894 videos and just replacing it with one Ovechkin at 895 video. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I mean, I'm already feeling presumptuous getting the script ready for that one, but it's a fun race to watch either way. And then there's the fun in Utah. I touched on this in my short about how they're having a little bit of trouble finding a name since Yeti won't let them use the name Yeti, or the plural form of it for that matter. So now they're giving us 3 options and still willing to stick with the hockey club. Even though initially they had the Wasatch. The Wasatch to go with the Mammoth and the Hockey Club as options. And obviously the Wasatch got so much of a disapproval that they changed it out to Outlaws. So one of those 3 names is definitely going to be your name. And I'm still pulling for Mammoth. That's just me. But also with the logos leaking, which I was hoping that wouldn't happen because I didn't want that early leak surprise. But with those leaking, it's not really hard to see if they'd actually stick with the Hockey Club, being that's the look they wanted to go for initially, right? But either way, I mean, whenever they figure out a name, whatever it is, whether it's Hockey Club, Mammoth, or Outlaws, or even the What's Up. Sorry, that's all I thought of when I thought Utah Wasatch. Wasatch was Utah What's Up. What's up? Ultimately, whatever their name is, whatever they end up being, I hope it works to their benefit. And you still got to admit, I said this then, I'm saying it now. Hell of a marketing ploy.
Hello?
By year 2, you've already got 4 jerseys under your belt. So that's never a bad thing from, the profitability standpoint of things. They know what they're doing. Now, obviously, before we get to the playoff push, and I do want to talk about the playoff push before we go, the next big thing coming up after the Four Nations face-off, and I'm surprised there's no roster freeze during the Four Nations face-off, but the next big thing after that is the trade deadline on March 7th, and obviously there's a lot of names that are always associated with trade deadline and rumors and all that stuff, including, but not limited to, players from your Seattle Kraken. Although they can't really trade Gord anymore because he's on IR. But it'd be interesting to see what kind of moves are going to be made at the trade deadline, being so many big moves have already been made. But there's always room for more big moves, right? Right. All right, so now we'll talk about the playoff push, or at least the run to the playoffs. And I'm a big believer of the 10-point rule. And what the 10-point rule is, if you're behind the wild card spot, or the last team that holds the last wild card spot, if you're behind them by 10 points, it's very hard to make those 10 points up, especially late in the season. I mean, I've only ever seen one team in my life beat that 10-point rule, and they won the Cup in, 2019? St. Louis, that is. I mean, obviously the mark right now is 61 points, as of this recording, is 61 points split by the Vancouver Canucks. So if you look at the field and everybody, 10 points below 61, so 51 is your bar. You already got 4 teams that are not making the playoffs. That being, obviously, the Sharks, the Blackhawks, the Predators, and your Seattle Kraken. I really don't know what's got to change in Seattle, but that's another topic for another video, I think. But based on that, you look at everybody else under the bubble, and it could be a very exciting push for that number 7, number 8 spot in the West. But as much as the West looks like it could be interesting, you have to look at the East. And the East, again, as of this recording, the bar is 61 points, and the Detroit Red Wings hold it. So if you're looking for teams under 10 points, I mean, the only team that fits that description is the feeder to the league in the Buffalo Sabres. But you could easily throw out the Flyers and the Penguins because, well, nobody at this point, I think, expects them to make a playoff push. But even still, between the two wild cards and every team above the Penguins at this moment, that could be a fun race. I mean, the Bruins, the Rangers, I mean, trade deadline will tell us exactly what those two teams are doing, but if they decide they want to play and actually make a push for the playoffs, this could get very interesting. I mean, again, with Columbus being in the mix, which I didn't think was going to be a thing, this could make for some interesting storylines in the Eastern Conference as far as the playoffs are concerned. Now, I'm not at a point where I feel comfortable enough to make playoff predictions, and I'm not about to go in and say, okay, well, this is my pick for the Cup, because right now, come on, my division predictions are a mess. What makes you think my playoff predictions at this point will make any sense? But either way, I mean, we'll see what happens after trade deadline. I think that'll tell the story for a lot of teams. You know, who's the buyer, who's the seller, who's making it, who's not making it. Either way, I mean, the most important thing I can say right now is I'm disappointed in my Seattle Kraken, who are going to make the playoffs, or going to miss the playoffs for a second straight year. As much as a lot of people want to say it's front office that needs to change, it's more goaltending than anything. I mean, we've already changed the coach. I don't think changing the GM at this point makes a difference, but goaltending has to change. And as good as the court is, holding on to Grubauer isn't making a lot of sense right now. But that's my own take on that. I mean, injuries aside, they need more scoring, and they need better defensive depth. But hopefully that's something the Kraken will address at either the trade deadline or the offseason, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Either way, these are just some of my thoughts coming up to the Four Nations face-off. Coming up to the Four Nations face-off break. But feel free to give me yours. Let me know what else I might have missed on all this that is worth talking about. This is another one of them Ches Hockey shows. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't think I don't appreciate the gesture, especially if you've made it to this point. And if you have made it to this point, just know that I am very, very grateful. I mean, to everybody who's come along for the ride, man, I'm glad you're here. But I mean, if you have made it to this point, feel free to give me that thumbs up. I think I'm entitled to it. I mean, if you watched the entire video up to this point. So let me know you're here. Let me know you're digging my stuff. Let me know you want to say hey. Trust me, that thumbs up goes a long way. That red button, let's just subscribe all over it. Come on, you know you want to. I know you want to. The algorithm knows you want to, so why fight it, right? I mean, trust me, subscribe, it'll make you feel good. It'll make me feel good. It'll get us closer to 500. I mean, we're pushing 3 at this point, and this is only February, so I mean, like I said, I wanted 500 by the end of the year. It might just happen, but I'm not counting chickens at this point. But to everybody, like I said, who has come along for this ride, thank you very, very much. I hope I'm keeping you entertained, and hope you're willing to stick around for a lot more. If you want to, that link in the description below, that'll take you to my Facebook page. Feel free to follow that one. I mean, it's free, and I'd love to build an audience on there just to get that page some numbers too. But moving forward, like I said, the next big thing as far as the NHL's regular season concerned is the trade deadline. So look for me to give my thoughts on that. But either way, in the meantime, and in between time, be looking for Warriors in the Trev. Later.